Okay, so during this debate video, I will be talking about whether we should or should not drill in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which is otherwise known as ANWR, and this is located in Alaska. And throughout the video, I'll be explaining why I believe we should not drill in the Arctic. And there are several different reasons why I am against drilling in the refuge, and 3 of these reasons include the fear that I have that the land will be ruined by this human encroachment, the negative impacts it will have on the wildlife in nearby areas, and the negative impact that it will have on the Native American populations who live off of the land. And so throughout this video, I intend to briefly talk about each of these reasons. And so the first of which is that the fear of what human encroachment will do, and basically the fear that the land will be ruined. And so what some of those videos that we watched kind of said, and what I 100% agree with, is that I feel that there are some places in the United States and across the world, but of course we're only talking about the United States right now, that are simply too special to drill and to fragment. And so there was a short video about the National Park Service, and they actually said that they believe that healthy parks and wild areas are part of healthy ecosystems. So I believe that if we allow drilling in this refuge, that it no longer becomes a healthy park, and it will actually degrade the nearby ecosystem. And so another video talked about how if man keeps going along this track, like just slowly increasing development and urbanization, and I know that oil drilling doesn't necessarily mean that we're turning it into a city, but you know, who's to say that we're not, is that like we'll slowly have less and less of these beautiful areas that are untouched by humans. And so what a lot of people are concerned about, and myself included, is that for future generations, like they're not going to be able to have these beautiful places in nature anymore. They're not going to have anything that doesn't have, like, you know, humans' beautiful touch on it. And so I found a statistic online that said that only about 14% of the US land is protected by the federal government as either wildlife refuges or national parks. I mean, and that's already a very pathetic number. So if we just keep allowing, even though this is just a small section of the refuge, like if we keep allowing these companies to go in whenever they want to and use the resources that are there, then like what's stopping other corporations from going into other protected places? You know, like I think we need to draw a line saying, no, that is protected area that you're not allowed to go in. Because if you say yes to one, then that will just be a stepping stone to everyone else wanting to use natural resources that are found in these protected areas. And so I think the same video that talked about how like some places are too special to drill and fragment talked about how like these are public lands, and it's the public's responsibility to get involved and take care of these places, and to allow for oil drilling is not to take care of these places. It's, in my opinion, it's just setting them up to be destroyed. And so, and to say that they're going to be destroyed is there's a lot of people who are saying that drilling could actually spell catastrophe for the fragile ecosystem. And the ecosystem that's there, it sustains life all the way up the Arctic food chain. So yes, there actually is evidence that if we do allow drilling, it could inevitably destroy the life around in that section. And even if it's not the actual drilling process, there's always a potential for a spill in which Greenpeace, which is an environmental activist group against drilling efforts in the Arctic, they actually claim that it would simply be impossible to clean up a spill in this environment. So regardless of how prepared Shell is, or the oil company that is planning to drill there, no matter how prepared they are, like they can't possibly fix everything that would be ruined by a spill. And so naturally the only way to prevent this is to not allow drilling in the first place. And so that kind of transitions a little bit into my other two topics on how we need to protect the land, because if we don't protect it from this drilling, it could potentially destroy the land. And like, humans aren't the only ones. Like, there are Native American people that use that land, but there's also wildlife that use the land. And I'm actually going to get into the wildlife a little bit later and kind of transition into how oil drilling could actually destroy the land for Native American populations. And so, which Native American populations almost entirely rely on the organisms that live there, the resources that the land provides to survive. And so the documentary that talked about how they're fighting for their land, it explained that the natives claim that the land is their ancestral territory, and that it would actually be impossible to live in rural Alaska if they were not able to live off the land. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking. And so one of the main things that I think a lot of people, why they want oil drilling, is for like economic benefits. They're saying that like Alaska, the cities around the oil drilling are, kind of falling apart. They could really benefit from this economic income that would be coming, the jobs that will be created, the income that will be coming from the oil. But one of the Native Americans that was interviewed actually explained that not everyone has benefited from the wealth of the people who are drilling. So they actually said, and I'm going to quote what they said, that there's a divide between those who want to live off the land and those who want to profit off its natural resources. And I'm going to elaborate off of that, is that yes, so there was an Alaskan Natives claim settlement in 1971 that allowed Native corporations to see big profits due to oil and mining, but they were partnered with the same big companies that are contributing to climate change. And they explained that even though there are profits from this oil, that it's only short term. Like, granted, the oil that they found like back then and have profited from back then, like, that's not there anymore. So like, there are still there are still villages, Native American villages, that are without running water and don't have like basic heat, like it's not like here. They're basically like off the grid. And so they're saying that not only did the partnership with the oil company bring in, like, it only brought in temporary money, but it's also contributing to climate change, which is degrading the environment that all the other Native Americans are using to survive. And so, and like I said earlier, most of the Alaskan Natives actually never saw the revenue from the oil company, from the oil industry. Living in Alaska is still expensive to live in the villages, and they did this brief little walkthrough, like a convenience store, and some of the prices in those stores were insane. Dog food was like upwards to like $70 or $90. I don't remember which one in particular. And so they don't make enough money to like buy that stuff in the convenience stores because it needs flown in. So like the prices are just way more expensive than around here. And so they have to depend on finding food and other resources from the land that surround them, not just from like a convenience store down the street. And so like I said, they explain that the land will always be there to provide for the people, and so they need to care for the land. And so actually Native Americans are against, like, even though they might make some like temporary money off these, most of them who never see profits from this oil drilling, they are 100% against drilling. And so, again, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog. And so, like I said earlier, with these oil companies that are contributing to climate change, they also went on to explain that Alaska Natives are hit first and hit hardest by global climate change. Because they depend so much on the health of the ecosystem around them, global climate change is drastically changing that. And so, like, if something were to happen to, say, like, wipe out the caribou population, they would be drastically affected and probably would start to lack food to help a lot of their people survive. And so natives have been fighting to keep the oil drilling off the coast of ANWR since the 1970s, because they're explaining that the environmental impacts won't be minimal. And since they depend on the health of the ecosystem more than like other people in the United States, that they really, really don't want it to happen. And so they explain that drilling for the oil could threaten the survival of both polar bears and caribou, which give birth on the northern coastal plain, and a spill would be absolutely devastating. Caribou being about 80% of their diet, it's not only essential to their culture, but it's also essential to their survival and their spirituality. So, you know, I think like we have already taken so much of their land, like to destroy what little they have left, which would not only affect like their survival, but it would probably just affect their outlook on life. You know, if it's affecting their culture and their spirituality, then that's just like so beyond cruel. Like I don't know. I was gonna stop there. So they explain that whatever happens to the caribou happens to the native people, because, like I said earlier, food flown in, it's too expensive for them to depend on, so they have to depend on food from the land. And so, and kind of like going off of what I said earlier, they mentioned that Alaska has seen billions of profits since the discovery of the last big oil field, but dozens of Alaskan native villagers have never been equipped with basic resources such as running water or plumbing. And so there's this huge, I don't know how to say it, but there's like this idea that we should drill because it's going to bring in revenue. Like, it's not going to hurt the native people, it's actually going to help them. They're going to have jobs, they're going to bring in money. But that's actually not true. I mean, the people who are profiting off of that money, like, it's Native Americans partnered with the oil companies. So, like, the Native Americans aren't even seeing, like, most of the profits. It's just the oil companies. And then the other Native Americans that have nothing to do with those oil corporations aren't seeing the money, and they're not benefiting from that money, and they're actually just getting probably more worse off because what they do use to survive is being destroyed. And so what the video ended with is that oil drilling could threaten and destroy an entire Native American civilization, and I don't think that that should go unnoticed. Like, I really do think that if people don't care about the health of the ecosystem and they don't care about the animals that are going to die, like, we have to think about the people who are probably going to die, and the whole civilization that we have already destroyed and killed and taken their land. Like, if we go about doing this, we're essentially saying, like, we don't care about your civilization and we're going to do what we want, and it's too bad if you can't find ways to survive. And I think that that's atrocious, in my opinion. And so what I mentioned earlier is that there are also not only impacts to the people, but there's also impacts to the wildlife, which then directly impacts the people. But, you know, if you're more concerned about the animals that are going to die, then this section's for you. And so biologists were talking about how they the wildlife around the Trans-Alaskan pipeline that was first brought into Alaska. They're saying that they actually didn't respond as negatively as they thought, but they're saying that they think that the animals will care more that if drilling starts up in the refuge. And so they talked about how oil spills can be devastating for wildlife. They drive huge tundra tracts and can rip up vegetation and destroy permafrost. And so they even talked about how even the noise and the dust from the operations of oil drilling can harm the local fauna. And that's the most minor, I think, where like the fact that even the most minor things that could be caused from oil drilling could affect the wildlife, that I can't even imagine what the major things like a spill could have. And they actually talked about it. Like if there were a spill, I mean, like we're talking about you would think that after the BP spill or something that we would not allow drilling, but I guess, it's in the past, people have forgotten, so which is kind of sad. And so they also talked about how Alaska, and especially in the refuge in ANWR, is actually breeding grounds to many endangered migratory birds. And so if something were to happen to this, these birds have nowhere to breed, to reproduce, that it's going to impact the rest of the planet, because like migratory birds, they're not just coming from the US. They could be coming from all over the world. They have nowhere else to breed. And so we're not just going to see negative impacts here. We're going to see negative impacts where those birds return. And again, I think a lot of people aren't thinking about that. And so they're also saying that the area designated for drilling, it's a key calving ground for caribou. Like I said earlier, the caribou are 80% of the Native American population's diet. So sure, I guess we don't care if like the caribou are dying, but if the caribou are dying will directly contribute to Native Americans dying, I think that's something that we need to address. And although the caribou population right now is not said to be endangered or going on like a decline, they're saying that biologists think that they might be on the brink of a steep decline due to climate change. And so I can only imagine that drilling will I feel like that's going to be the tip of the iceberg, and then they're just going to see, or not the tip of the iceberg, like the icing on the cake, I guess, for the caribou population. And so they talked about how oil and gas development has exacerbated caribou decline in other areas. I mean, and if that's not enough, like, why do we have to wait to see it destroy the caribou population here before we start, thinking about what it could possibly do? And, I mean, this isn't even a testament to, like, how all the other wildlife that are there, like, they might not be able to adapt to whatever changes come from this oil industry. So, like, since the change will probably be quick, because, like, they are really concerned with this oil that could be under there, I mean, the wildlife and the local fauna and flora around there could just be severely negatively impacted. That I think for these reasons, and I apologize, I think I started to get a little repetitive, but I think for these reasons, we need to really consider not drilling in ANWR. I mean, for all the reasons why I said, or that I read, that we should drill, I mean, personally, I don't really think it's going to hurt our country that much. I don't think shipping in oil is that big of a deal. So, but that's just my 20 minutes on the topic, so.